Hello and welcome to this week's press preview alongside Justin Conn. I'm Aren Dow. We're almost halfway through the regular season of football, through 4 weeks, and I feel like we're starting to get some idea. And definitely a crazy game from Monticello at Toledo Unity last week, where Brandon Wildman throws for 587 yards. Noah Freeman nearly sets a state record as far as receiving in a game. We're just going to kind of talk about maybe like one big thing from last week. I don't know, just what did you see from last week?
Well, I mean, no offense to the Moroa St. T game, but I think that was the game of the year in the area so far. I think they ended up recalculating the stats, and Wildman went over 600 yards passing in that game. And it's just one of those things where, Unity had looked so dominant, and obviously nobody's going to stop their offense, but to see what Monticello did to their defense,
right.
It was very eye-opening. And that was a week after Monticello had only scored 14 points against Clifton Central, and you're thinking, wait, maybe this team isn't quite, at the level we thought they were. And then to have a game like that and to put up those kind of numbers, I think everybody had to open up, everybody in the area had to take note of that, just because that's a pretty unbelievable performance offensively out of a team.
Yeah, the one thing that I kind of took away from last week, the game I went to was Sullivan, Ocala Valley against Warrensburg Latham, and Sullivan just looked dominant, and a team that really had playmakers all across the field, offense, defense, and special teams. And I think the CIC, kind of they got dumped on maybe a little bit, because those are the teams that have pulled away. Maybe they're not very good, but I'll tell you what, watching Sullivan last week, that was a team that was complete across the board. And as far as, how they do come playoff time, I think Sullivan, where they're at right now, you think you have 5 more weeks to kind of prepare for the playoffs. I think that's a team that looks that could get a playoff win in 3A even. I was really impressed with Sullivan last week. And to see, Nick Frericks, who was able to, he really didn't run a whole lot. He didn't have to, but the way that he passed the ball really opened my eyes at how efficient he was and how he had multiple receivers to throw to and able to make reads. I was really impressed with Sullivan last week.
That's interesting, too, because the week before I had watched Sullivan play, and it was more, he didn't pass the ball real well, but, man, he ran the ball so hard. Wanted to talk a couple more things that stood out to me. Arcola and the way they beat Argenta.
Yeah.
I know I was in Arthur that night, and I think people were reacting to that score saying, it kind of said, oh, maybe Arcola could be the team to beat in the LOVC Northwest now, just because of the way they beat Argenta in that game. And then MacArthur, I felt like if they could hang around in that game early, I didn't really feel like they could beat Springfield Sacred Heart Griffin, but I thought if they hung around with them, that was a good sign, and they did. They played with them for a half, and I like that. I think that bodes well for MacArthur going forward.
Yeah, and I've said this before, and I'll repeat it, but you look at what Washington did last year against SHG in the playoffs, and it was a very similar game where Washington got out and quick, and it was tie game, and they scored 14 points, and then SHG kind of pulled away. So I mean, I don't know if MacArthur's quite on that level as Washington was last year, but they played SHG the same way, and that's definitely encouraging.
We're going to bring back something we haven't done this season. We've done a lot in the past, and it's the top 5. I think in the years we've done the top 5, and it's been a few years now. I know I would say we've done that for 5 or 6 years now. This was the most difficult top 5 I've ever put together. I had no clue outside of my number 1 team. I think I wrote down 11 different teams that I felt like were legitimate candidates for the top 5, and even at the end, I think I had 5 teams for that 5th spot where I didn't really feel comfortable putting any of them in that number 5. I argued all of them out of it at one point or another before I ended up settling on one. So go ahead, Aaron. I want to hear your top 5. We haven't discussed them yet, so I think they're going to be pretty wildly different.
Well, you just talked about Arcola. That's my number 5 team. I think, you look at the schedule so far, and, those first couple of weeks of the season, maybe not the strongest schedule, but honestly, Arcola has played as well as anybody else. And, yeah, I mean, the schedule maybe not so great, but the way that Clayton Strader's played and Wyatt Fischel, I mean, those guys have really stood out so far. MacArthur, I have at number 4. Even with that loss last week, and maybe some of that Chatham Glenwood game maybe doesn't look quite as good, after Glenwood's played the last couple of weeks. But I think the way that they have played this year, they're more of a complete team than we've seen the last couple of years, and that team has made the playoffs. It's been 5-5, and you look at Tylen Powell, who kind of came out of nowhere and had 2 touchdowns against SHG. So there's playmakers all over the field. It's just a matter of kind of putting that together once they played Rochester and Southeast those last 2 weeks of the season. Sullivan, I have Sullivan Okaw Valley at number 3. Really impressed. Like I said, last week I was just really impressed with Nick Frericks, and you look at Alec Ballinger at wide receiver. You have Joe Jeffers, who was really, really quick for them at receiver, and then they were just able to do whatever they wanted to do. If they wanted to run a jet sweep around, and they were able to pick up some yards. The special teams. You look at that kicking return game. And Gerald Temples just looked like he's having a good time. It's a fun season right now, and they're just prepared. They are executing at every level right now. I'm really impressed with Sullivan. Monticello, I have at number 2. I think Monticello, the way that they give up 55 points, that's a little concerning, and whether that's worthy of a number 2 spot, I don't know. But they haven't beat Unity in such a long time. 58 points and just. I don't think you expect from a Scott Hamilton team from Unity to give up that many points. And Monticello has shown that they can win shootouts. I think you have to put Monticello in the top 5. And I think 2 is definitely – I think they have potential for being up there. And I know Casey Westfield, number 1. And this coming week, against Lawrenceville, I think that's the last team that can possibly beat them on this regular season schedule. But they've looked good. They really held Robinson down, a really good rushing team, and didn't allow them to get a whole lot on the ground. So that's why I have them at number 1.
It wasn't quite as off as I thought it would be as far as me.
I wasn't quite as wrong?
Well, we'll see going down the road who that is. Number 5, I ended up settling on Sullivan Okaw Valley just because I think that win against Tuscola is right up there with any win anybody's had this season as far as big wins. And I still think that's probably, we talked about it that week, that's the biggest win Sullivan has had in a really long time. Arcola, I did consider them, but 4 combined wins. Their opponents have 4 wins, and their opponents have 4 combined wins. Taylorville is a team that's going to say, "Whoa, what about us?"
Yeah,
they have their opponents have 3 combined wins, and then Maroa and St. Teresa. That game, the first game of the season where St. Teresa got blown out by Unity, and then they come back and beat Maroa, and then since neither has really played a great team, had a big win. So I just kind of felt like it was really tough to get them on the schedule. It is hard for me to rank Sullivan ahead of. I have a hard time picturing Sullivan beating Maroa just because of the way Maroa has beaten them over the years. But at this point, they have a big win and Maroa doesn't. So I got to go with Sullivan at number 5. Number 4, I have MacArthur. I definitely agree. The wins against Glenwood and Landfair weren't. You'd like to see them maybe have won those games a little bigger, but at the same time, they did get the wins in games that MacArthur has struggled with in the past, close games against good teams. So, they got the wins in those games, and they have a ton of weapons, like you said. Tylen Powell comes out of nowhere. I think Dion Norfleet's a guy who could get you on a given week. And obviously, Sean Trust Spates, Jaquay Owens, and Shaquez Bond, and then DeVince Lewis also has played well on both sides of the ball. So, I like their talent, and I think going forward, it's going to be a good season for them. Number 3, I went with Monticello as well. The loss to Clifton Central does bug me. I think that bugs me more than them giving up the points to Tolono, just because I think everyone's going to give up that many points to Tolono. I think, I would be surprised this Friday, we'll talk a little bit more about it, if Maroa is able to hold them to too much below, 4 or 5 touchdowns. I just think that they're a team that's going to score a lot of points. I really like the way Monticello came back in that game. They were down a couple times where you thought, okay, they're not going to win this game, and they did. And I think maybe they found some things that now going forward, are, like we said earlier, are going to be pretty tough to stop. Number 2, a team that I was surprised that wasn't in your top 5, Mount Zion. I really do think that maybe they have the most impressive schedule so far. They're 3-1. They had the 1-point loss to Mascoutah in a game I know you covered, and I think a lot of people I've talked to felt like maybe if they play them again, they can beat them. And I know Mascoutah doesn't want to hear that, but that's a game that Mount Zion was in and had a chance to win. Then you have the win against Mahomet. They're 3-1 now, and they had Jerseyville was a good team too. So, and just the way they've scored when the games have been close and they've put teams away. I kind of like just the way. I think right now they're playing the second best of anyone. Number one, like he said, KZ Westfield. They had the win against Robinson, which I think is probably one of the better wins anybody's had this season. Robinson's a really good team, and they also beat Newton. And that's a good win. Newton's played well so far and done some really good things on offense. And that was a weird game where it got stopped with the rain and everything. So that's right now I think KZ is. I picked him to go to state to start of the year, and I still feel pretty strongly about that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think KZ's pretty solid number one spot, and then I think 2 through 8, you have to nitpick and say, well, I mean, like Mount Zion, I kind of felt like, well, those three wins, they've been really close, if not down at halftime, and then they kind of pulled away, and it's just one of those things that you kind of have to nitpick, and yeah, it's really tough right now, even through 4 weeks, to say, this team is definitely number 2, which is crazy after, considering the last couple of years. So kind of looking at the schedule, and this will definitely, I think, help pair out, who is really at top of some of these conferences. Because really, if you look at the Apollo, you look at the Little Illini, you look at Little Okaw Northwest, and you look at the Okaw Valley. I mean, all those conferences have games where the top 2, or maybe like one in maybe the 1 and 3 teams are playing each other, and that starts, at Mount Zion against Taylorville, where this will be Taylorville's toughest opponent so far. And Mount Zion, they'll be at home, so they get another home game against Taylorville, a team they haven't seen in a long time.
And it might be the toughest game they've had so far. We're not sure. Yeah. I mean, Taylorville, like I said, the teams they've played have 3 combined wins. They obviously, I like that coming off last year, they made the playoffs in the Central State 8. You kind of got to like that pedigree coming into the season, and they've beat up the teams on their schedule so far. So, I mean, I think a lot of people are thinking Taylorville is the team to beat here, but then just the way Mount Zion has scored points, I don't know that anybody is going to slow them down. So that's a really interesting matchup. Plus, Taylorville's they're sort of the defensive, they're a tough defensive team, and Mount Zion's going to outscore you. So I think there's that nice clash of styles there, on the turf at Mount Zion. That's going to be a lot of fun.
I think it's going to be a shootout, definitely. Tanner Champley has played much better his senior year. I mean, you look at Bo Bouchon at running back. Taylorville has some really nice offensive options, and I think it's going to be another shootout at Mount Zion, probably another late game. I mean, I think it's going to be a lot of scoring. Now you look at the Little Illini, and I think you have to start with Lawrenceville at Casey. I mean, these are the top 2 teams in the Little Illini right now, and Lawrenceville has looked just as good as Casey through these first 4 weeks.
They really have, and I think that's, they're a team that's been sort of, maybe the middle of the pack in the Little Illini, and now they have had a couple of wins this year to where maybe, they're better. And like you said, this is Casey's last test, but, just outside of that one loss to Marshall, 3 years ago now, they pass all the tests. So, I mean, it's tough for me until somebody in the Little Illini steps up and shows they can beat KZ. I think KZ's always the team to beat, and Lawrenceville hasn't had that kind of win. That would be a win that would shock the state if Lawrenceville's able to win that game.
And I think they're going to need a pass. So you look at like Zach Shoulders. He's run the ball well, but like I said, I mean, KZ stopped Robinson's rushing attack last week, and if they can do the same against Lawrenceville, they're going to have to air it out against KZ. And then the other Little Illini matchup between Newton and Robinson, and Robinson kind of coming off the tough loss to KZ. Newton has looked pretty good. They had that tough loss to KZ 2 weeks ago, and kind of got they got that quick touchdown and then fell off a little bit. But Newton, Brock Mimosa, quarterback, has played really well, and he has I think quite a few options around him that I think this will be a pretty close matchup.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I agree as well, and it's kind of fun to see Newton kind of put their name back in the hat as a team that could possibly be a playoff type team. And even if they lose this game, I still like them coming on the stretch to be a playoff team. Switching over to the Okaw, which I think this is probably are the 2 games that are going to teach us the most about the teams in our area. Just it's going to have a lot of other effects. Like even CIC teams are going to go, okay, maybe this win means this and this one means that. But obviously, Maroa, Forsyth at Tolono Unity. That's a big game. That's been a big game for several years now, and I think it's the big one this week as well. Merle has to go to Tolono again. Last year, they embarrassed Tolono. I mean, they put it on them, and I know that so you have that sort of storyline, and then you have the fact that Tolono is really scoring a lot of points, and Maroa, they've had a couple good weeks in a row here, but their passing game hasn't been what it's been the last several years now. And you're thinking, well, they're going to need that to beat Tolono. Especially the way after Monticello, the way they pass the ball. I don't know that you're going to run Jack Hockaday 25 times this game. I think you're going to need to see them pass the ball.
And maybe they're saving it for this week. They certainly didn't need it the last 2 weeks. But you look at these are two very similar teams in the fact that Taylor White at Tolono Unity and Jack Hockaday. Both quarterbacks that can run and pass. We talked about Brandon Wildman and Noah Freeman, those guys. But Taylor White had 494 total yards last week. So he is definitely a dual threat. And they didn't have Colton Reed last week at running back, which is a big, that's a big factor for them. So I think Maroa. This will be probably the toughest matchup they had so far. It will be the toughest matchup they had so far. As long as they can, that defense can pick when to stop Taylor White on the ground and when to stop him through the air. I think that's the thing they need to key on to get through this next week. And
we have seen over the past couple of years, if any team has had success against Tolono with their defense, it's Maroa. They've really, even the year they lost, it was 7-6. They've done a great job against a Tolono Unity offense that is rarely stopped by anyone. So that's sort of another kind of storyline about that game is, can Tolono find a way to move the ball against a Maroa defense they haven't had much success against in recent years. The other OCOG game, Monticello at St. Joseph Ogden. We've talked a lot about Monticello, but SJO is pretty much been beating the teams down they've played and has been really impressive. They destroyed Clifton Central, and that was the team that beat Monticello. So right away you're thinking, oh boy, I don't know, maybe Monticello doesn't have a chance in this one. But after last week, I don't know that you can say that at all about Monticello.
I think with Monticello and SJO, it's another really tough game for the Sages. This is part of their 3 games in a row. That's going to be a really tough schedule for Monticello. But SJO is a different team than Unity. I think they run the ball a little bit more, and obviously it's a rematch of the playoff game from last year where SJO really came in and just dominated that game. Ryan Choate had a huge game, they couldn't bring him down. And so, maybe you'll see something like the shootout like it was last week against Unity for Monticello, but this is going to be the toughest matchup probably Monticello has all year. This is the favorite in 3A, and if they can beat them after beating Unity, who was number 2 last week, Monticello has a pretty good resume, but this will definitely be a tough game for them.
And I don't think there's any question that they're going to have to outscore them because I don't know that Monticello is going to be able to stop their running attack. Switching over to the Little Okaw, and we'll do the Northwest. A couple pretty good games, but the main one, Arcola at Arthur Lovington at Win Hammond. I really do feel like this is the conference championship right here.
Yeah, when we talked about Arcola's schedules so far, this is the game where they can kind of prove, hey, those first 4 games aren't a fluke. This is something that we can. This is a team that can come in and play against some of those top teams, like Arthur, who after that first week has looked pretty good the last 3 weeks. I think between Clayton Strader hasn't had to pass a whole lot. They've blown out their 4 games so far, but I think he's shown that he can be effective when he needs to be. I think he has 23 completions and 9 touchdowns, so he can pass it, and it's just a matter of doing that against top tier teams like Arthur, and the rushing attack is there. Wyatt Fischel and Strader have combined to play really well at the running back position, and obviously defensively, they've thrown out a couple shutouts here. That defense has looked really good, and you saw Tyler Schuring last week. That's something they'll have to take care of.
Right. I don't know that anyone's going to completely stop Schuring. They have a lot of creative ways to get him out in open space and get him around the edge, and they really do a good job with that. I think the one thing that Arthur, probably the biggest weakness they had in the game I saw them against Sangamon Valley was they didn't shut down the pass very well, and Sangamon Valley's not a passing team. I think that's somewhere where Arcola can get them, but like you said, they've had most of their success on the ground. I do think they're going to have to pass the ball to beat Arthur. But, that was a weakness for Arthur that they really were concerned about going into this game. And I don't know. Offensively, though, I think it's going to be a shootout, just like we talked about with Monticello and St. Joe Ogden. I think it's going to be a shootout just because Arcola has the type of players that can move the ball, and I don't think anybody's going to slow down Schuring. And they also have a nice passing game with Kyle Fegan that he can pass to they have a lot going for them. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I do think it's going to decide the conference.
Yeah, a lot of tough games, I think, for Pick'em this week. Make sure to check that out. We're up to week 5, obviously, in Pick'em, and I will say I did catch our Alex McNamee for the lead in the office, so I'm pretty happy about that. But yeah, so make sure you check out Press Pick'em. We'll be out a ton of games here on Friday, so be sure to check out HR Preps for all the coverage of Week 5 this week, and we'll see you out there.